Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today we are going to be talking about multimedia theatre, something that we're really interested in exploring a little bit more. So multimedia theatre is theatre that explores dance, music, performance, live performance, digital content, all kinds of stuff. Basically any type of media, which is why it's called multimedia theatre, that you can include in your performance work as part of the performance. So it's not something that's happening before or afterwards, it's integral and it's part of the performance and it adds to the performance experience for the audience. Multimedia very simply means more than one type of media, more than one, multi. All it's doing is using things like technology, video, sound, animation to add to and help create the story. So it's any type of media that can be added on top of that basic acting performance, which creates something extra for the audience. Now, there's an example of a multimedia performance here. This is from a play called Network, which was at the National Theatre featuring Bryan Cranston, who's that man you can see at the front. This was about a man who was a news reporter. And the kind of idea of the performance is that he's always being followed and he's always being on air. So you can see here, this man stood behind him is holding a camera. Okay, so they're holding a camera. And behind them, there's a live feed of what this camera is recording, projected behind them, which is so interesting. And it gives that second perspective. So the audience here, and there's audience sat on stage here as well, which is super cool, are getting two different perspectives of the lead actor. So they've got that live feed performance there. So that's an example of multimedia technology. A second example is the play Curious Incident, which I know a lot of you guys have seen. Curious Incident uses multimedia really, really interestingly. So you've got the projections on these three walls, and on the floor. So there's a projection mapping all around the stage, and different things that help to tell the story are projected at different points. So at this moment, they're talking about how Christopher's going to go to London and he's going to meet his mother. And projected behind him is all of these train lines that you can see coming in and the roads that you can see coming into London, helping us understand that that's the key point, that that's what we're really focused on in this scene. And for those of you who've seen Curious Incident, you'll know that this train set that you can see on the floor is also a really interesting use of multimedia. Throughout the first act, Christopher is building this train set slowly, and you see it building on the stage, and you don't know what's going to happen. You can just see him building it, and then it comes to a point where the train set comes to life and all of these little lights that you can see turn on, and the train, I don't know where it is in this picture, but the train starts running around the train set and it's all turned on through the electricity that's obviously underwiring it. That's a really clever use of multimedia. Something that you thought was quite simple, was just a simple prop, then comes to life through the use of the electricity and adds that extra experience for the audience, brings us into the story that little bit more, makes us more invested. So there's two examples there of the multimedia that you could be using. Now, we're going to briefly mention a couple of practitioners. So practitioners, like we've mentioned, are people who create theatre. Now, our key one when we're thinking about multimedia is a man called Edward Gordon Craig. He loved a bit of abstract theatre, and he was one of the first people to start thinking about how the entirety of the performance can help evoke emotion and make us think things. He sees the scene, which I love, he sees the scene as a living thing. I think that's really beautiful. He sees the entire performance as something that's alive and something that's communicating something to the audience. So we've got Edward Gordon Craig, and then in the modern day, we've got a woman called Katie Mitchell, who's a brilliant director, and she works a lot with projection and with sound in her performances. We've got Deviate Theatre, who use verbatim theatre, so that's where you use somebody else's words. And in Deviate, they often have the words being spoken on a voiceover, and they use projection really frequently to be drawing attention to keywords. So when a word is said in the voiceover, they'll write it on the board or it'll appear as a projection, and it draws our attention to that keyword. And then finally, we've got Draw and Code, who are a really interesting theatre company working with projection and mapping, which is where you've got something happening on the projection and the audience, the performer even interacting with that. So it looks like the two are working together, when in reality, it's just timed really cleverly. So those are our practitioners. Multimedia theatre. Now, this is where we come to how you can explore and experiment using multimedia within your own performances. So you've got loads and loads of options, and I'm not going to read them all out. But things like using live streams, like we saw in that first image, using light to create emotion and meaning, like Edward Gordon Craig would be interested in. And then we've got this idea of using technology, something that's happening a lot within theatre and performance at the moment. I've seen shows where you've been voting live, where they've had hashtag streams projected, where you've had one character's using their phone and you can see what they're doing on their phone. And then finally, the use of sound. So the use of soundscaping. Sound doesn't necessarily mean music, and that's really important. What can you include? What sound effects or soundscapes can you put into your performance to add to the effect? If we're in a busy street, you're not just going to have the sound of one car driving past. How can you create that sound and add to the audience experience in that way? That's what you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about multimedia. It's focused on our audience, because we make theatre for our audience, and how you can add to their experience and help them understand what you're trying to communicate to them more clearly. So this is what I think we should do as a first step to thinking about multimedia. The scene is a living thing, which is that quote from Edward Gordon Craig. So what I want you to be thinking about is how the stage and the scene can establish the mood and emotion of the performance. I want you to think about the emotions or the feeling of a character or a scene from your performance that you're working on at the moment. So that's your devised performances. And then I want you to imagine that you have an entire room that your audience are going to walk into, and that room needs to summarize that emotion or feeling. But focus first on the media in the room rather than the performer. So as an idea, I'm saying that the room is 4 meters squared, which is just sort of a normal sized room. And it has plain white walls, and there's no restrictions at all on what can go inside it. Okay, so it's not huge, it's decent size, plain white, and there's no restrictions on what you can put in it. So I want you to have a look back at those types of multimedia that we were talking about a minute ago. I want you to consider what media you could use to create the emotion or feeling that you want to establish in that room. So maybe if it's one character's uncertainty, they're trying to make a decision, how can you create a room that emotes this idea of uncertainty? Then you're going to decide how you as a performer could interact with the media. Maybe you're writing in a book and there's a small camera looking over the writing, and that is projected onto a wall. So the audience can see the projection of what you're writing, but actually the act in itself is very small. Maybe it's a case of there's sound effects, and you as an audience, as a performer, only react when one word is said, and that draws the audience's attention a little bit more to that. Then you're going to have a go at creating. Now, I know some of you guys are absolutely brilliant at creating short films. I know some of you guys are musicians, so we can be thinking about what you can have a go at creating. Obviously, as best you can at the moment from what you can do in the house, or if you're coming into school, maybe you can work something out, but only use what you can at the moment, don't push it. But I want you to create one